This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
We're just going to get into it today. We're going to cover a little more about the women in Shane's life today, but more so, we're going to talk about the Me Too movement and how it affected Shane personally. How are you doing today?
I'm okay.
Wonderful. It's always good to see you.
Oh yeah, you too. Absolutely. I love recording and doing what we do. It's awesome.
For all of you to know a little behind the scenes insight, we are recording these simultaneously, one day at a time, and this is a quite dense set of recordings we're doing, so it's been intense and very intimate. I really enjoy doing these particular recordings with you because I've really gotten to know you in this past year, and for this year I think that this is sort of like we're at the tip of the iceberg and we're about to go over the end and just sled on down. So I will hold your hand as we go down. We won't crash into any trees.
Oh, wonderful! That's great. Yeah, and you're referring to these 3 episodes.
Yes.
The one about that
yes.
We're recording simultaneously in the holiday season at the darkest time of the year.
It can be cold, but when you have a friend along with you, it can be warm as well.
Yeah. I'm a very lucky man to know you.
I'm lucky as well. Thank you. All right. So all of us should remember. If you don't remember, the Me Too movement began several years ago, and it was a hashtag and regarding how women are treated, confessions by all kinds of women. And it was started by one woman, and now it resonates with almost any woman. Shane, tell me how you found out about Me Too, how it affected you, just in a nutshell first.
Well, I consider myself a cultural farmer. I plant seeds and watch them bloom culturally. And so I pay attention to many, cultures online. I pay attention. So when the Me Too hashtag took off, I'm right there because I'm paying attention, like as the farmer looking at the cultural field. And I watched this hashtag unfold, not understand, I'm coming with a skeptical tone or skeptical eye when I look at these things. And it just it was how I see it. And I've been a publisher for 30 years. I've done this for over 30 years. I cannot think in the history of humankind anything more important or more incredible than the Me Too hashtag. It just unfolded so rapidly. It started thousands of stories, hundreds of thousands of stories, millions of stories, just getting added to this hashtag. And I'm reading it it consumed my time for at least 2 weeks, probably 12 hours a day. Like I just couldn't quit reading it. It was so compelling and so educational because, you think you know, you think you know, and then I'm sympathetic to struggles. I understand women's rights. I understand some of that stuff, but that Me Too movement took all of the cover off, and it was just bare and vulnerable, and it was like incredible, and it was every woman in the world. It felt like it was all kinds. It was just incredible, and them telling their stories from a slight. So from slights to like paying more for dry cleaning, which we've heard for 20 years, from slights like that to really heavy stuff. Mm-hmm. And I caught myself in tears, weeping more than once. And it was just incredible. It was so I wept for myself as well, because I related to some of the stuff in there, which is, as a man, we have expectations, and one of them is to never show our emotions. If we show our emotions, we become food. We're weak and all this stuff. So that's a hard thing to say. I related with the Me Too movement, but it's true. But I also felt really sad for the women I knew in my life. And I also felt some sense of remorse for how I saw them or treated them, and unintentionally treated them. It was a social norm. And I was like, that's fucked up. And there's basically my brush with the Me Too movement.
Did the stories of people you didn't know resonate as remind you of women you knew?
Oh, yeah.
Put them in those situations.
Oh, it was so many. Yeah, it was like just they were talking about me. It was total poetry. It was. Yeah. How could you not? If you're blind, you can't. But how could you not see it? Like you're like, oh my God, oh geez, oh I've done that. Oh man, I've seen that in my life. Oh wow, that's why it was so heavy, because they took the scare. They took something off it where it was just vulnerable and brutal and true, and it was like, wow, I am blown away by this. And it was like the greatest book ever written, the most important book ever written online by millions of women every nanosecond for weeks. And it was the most incredible collaboration I've ever seen as an artist or an author or a publisher. And I don't think people see it the way I see it, but I think they will in history. I think history will say that was one of the most important works ever written. And it was written by basically almost the whole of womankind.
Yes. I'm sure it resonates to you as an underground publisher, as an underground artist. The idea that you've said many times about how, 20 years from now, this kind of art will be in museums. It's sort of the same way. This is going to be in generations from us, kids' history books. It'll be several more pages than just suffragettes.
Oh, yeah.
And I find it fascinating how, while the movement was very intersectional, very diverse, it also was unifying at the same time.
Yeah.
It's amazing how so many different people had very kindred emotions. And, I think that women sometimes get a bad rap for not getting along with each other. Or we sometimes, there have been many times where causes and movements seem to have rifts in them, and it's often given a bad rap as a catfight by the media. And this was something that I don't think anyone anticipated to be so big. And it's so beautiful that while it's built on pain, that pain is something that we can kind of comfort each other about, that, that common ground is something you can't fight over. It's kind of foolish to find a problem with it.
True. I'm with you there. I was blown away by it. It's hard for me to talk about that stuff totally yeah. I mean, I'm blown away by it right now, just speechless almost about the concept of it. And I do see, here's something, like growing up pre-internet, as an artist, you have this concept of wanting to create change. You want to, a young idealistic person too, and I keep that idealism even to my older age, that I want to do something to create change. And I think I've done some cool stuff, but seldom do you see the change that you create in your lifetime. When I say I'm a cultural farmer, I plant seeds that I probably will never see fruit. But that's fine with me. I just keep planting the seeds slowly. To see something, a seed planted and fruit in front of your eyes and make change, definitive change, is incredible. And to know that the pain that I read from multiple generations of women in that Me Too movement hashtag will not be happening to younger women. Like this is like the end of the line for that shit. It definitely feels that way. It definitely feels that way. And I when I look at the younger generation, 19, 20, they're different. Like they caught that and they're like, yeah, fuck that shit. And so I was talking to my nephew last night about this. He's 19 and he was like, yeah, they're totally different than my mom. Women, I was asking him about this and he's like, oh yeah, women are totally different than how my mom was in my generation, and cool.
In our society, we have a tendency to expect instant results or results that we will be alive to see. And oftentimes that impatience gets the best out of movements, gets the best out of people, gets the best out of us. And this was quite an investment for people. Those results aren't going to be instant, but the conversation that we're having, the conversation that was had a couple years ago, this is us watering those plants, giving it fertilizer.
Yeah.
So one term that I think of when I think of how you or others may have come to the realization that this is fucked up. Oh my God, I didn't know this. Oh my God, is the idea of being hidden in plain sight. And it sounds like a lot of these anecdotes that women have are things that were hidden in plain sight, things that were not necessarily considered by others to be a problem, but now that they are being said out loud, it is coming to light that these are problems that women go through. And I was curious about these, if they were these things generational things? Like when you talk about something that was just normal to you, that it turns out it's painful for women or something like that. I'm curious, is it just a cultural upbringing as a man or something generational that was just accepted?
Boy, there's so many variables in that. I thought about that myself, and I thought, is it generational? Is it class? Is it, and I had a weird childhood, as people maybe who've listened along understand. It was abusive, dysfunctional, and really toxic. And most of my education, pre-hitting the streets and doing interviews and doing my artwork, like that's where I got my PhD. But a lot of what I saw was from TV. That's where I met Frank Zappa. That's where I saw the Brady Bunch. So my interpretation of what women were there, but also, so it's hard. I'm a different, I've never seen women as lesser than me, but yes, there was the roles. This is what I saw as a child. Okay. I saw the face and then I saw the inside of people. And I was lucky to do that. I worked at a funeral. I didn't work at a funeral. I spent my summers at a funeral home. So I was able to see bizarre situations. Also, my mother was strong and abusive, and so I'm attracted to strong women because of that. But there's this idea that when my mother was having affairs, when she was able to let her sexuality out, she took me along with her. And so I'd be locked in like a bedroom or an office, a man's office, and I'd hear my mom fucking in the other room. And so as a child, I saw this shadow self of a woman. Like I was like, as a child, I was like, why is this happening? Like, I don't understand it. And then, come home and they might be arguing and stuff like that. So I'm seeing this whole unhappy life, but going here to be happy, or sounding like joy to me. I was just a kid, like listening. It sounded like joy in the other room. And I didn't understand that that's something that, like that's something that's a heavy thing. Like women have to have the shadow self to have joy. And so that's something I saw, the two sides of it. So I don't know how to answer the question if it's generational. I don't know if it's so blanketed in that way. I could tell you now, I guess one thing that comes to mind, and it's off topic maybe, but it's like the Me Too movement inspired me to be able to communicate this way, be vulnerable. And I think the next step will be other men communicating their issues. Because I think along with the Me Too movement, there's issues that men have directly related to that oppression, whether it's intentional or not.
That's a really good observation to put out there. I don't think that many people may say it out loud, but I think a lot of men may quietly agree with that. I think that it's important for these reflections to be out there as well. I think that there's a mild societal expectation that if these people are talking, we're supposed to stay quiet and complicit. And so it's mildly controversial for men to say anything in terms of, women's experiences. But I think that because we all live together, we all put up with each other, you are affected. And that's very important that you see yourself in these things, or you see you're inspired to, make your changes even for yourself.
I didn't talk to my mother for 13 years. When I came back and started to communicate to her, I asked her a favor. I said, here's something that you can do for me. I want you to tell me all of your shadow stuff. I want you to tell me what's going on, what the women experiences that you hide. I need to know this so I can understand what happened in my marriage. And she basically, told me a lot of shit that was like heavy. And it was like basically my grandmother, her grandmother, all of them did the same thing. Would marry the first guy that was, the first guy that they could see would take them out of the home. And marriage was basically their emancipation papers. They were able to be free then. They were able to have some opportunity at earning or getting something. And so that wasn't necessarily the person they lusted after. Two different things. So they would use a man to get out of the house, and then they would have affairs behind their back. And my mother told me this is like from every woman that she knew. And my grandma did. I was like, Grandma? Holy shit. And, it's just the way it is.
It's quite humanizing for people such as grandparents who we see as only one sort of figure. It adds a lot of dimension to them.
Yeah, and to hear this occult knowledge from my mother was wild to me, because I was like, wow. And then was this how Dad's mother was? And she goes, oh yes, absolutely. She was a black widow wife, and she ended up killing your grandfather, by just stress and fucking his friend on the couch and all that, and doing it really purposeful to hurt his feelings. And then there's that part of the woman's experience that there's a sadistic or part of it. And I'm not even saying that's wrong. I mean, but there's a part of this acting out that has a sadist attachment to it. And when you're oppressed for so long, that sort of comes out in art and actions in all oppressed communities. You'll hear a very extreme, kill my oppressor, kill my master. And then you hear people talking about peaceful ways to work with the oppressor or get above the oppressor. And so it's in all communities, and so it's unfortunate. I don't want to say it's just unfortunate. But yeah, when Linda spilled her guts on that stuff, I was like, wow, that is fucking nuts. That is just crazy. And that's, but she felt empowered too by the Me Too movement. She really loved that. And it was nice. It's nice to see her. Like when I came back, I had to tell her, the reason I came back, and I spoke about this in the last show, but one of the reasons is I needed to hear some of that. And I needed to tell her that I needed to tell some of the women in my life that we spoke of the last episode that I was sorry for holding them to something that was unrealistic. And I didn't even realize that I was doing that until I read the Me Too movement. Much like my mother, her affairs, I held against her. I thought she ruined this marriage. Her anger, I could understand more. And, so it's stuff like that. I'm not sure how to explain that any more than I just did.
How did she take your apology?
Well, she took it. She invited me in and listened to me. And it was a bumpy road at first, but I had to keep communicating that I have boundaries. And if you're going to communicate to me that way, we won't be friendly too long. I'll only be able to be here for about 10 minutes. I'll have to leave. If you want to be my friend, you have to respect my boundaries. And that's something I learned in therapy and stuff like that. And it's her choice. And she chose to respect my boundaries, and she really tries hard to respect those boundaries. And she's now going to counseling and trying to get her own shit together, because I advise that. I'm like, if I were you, I'd go to counseling. There's a lot of stuff that you've been through that comes out in ways that are inappropriate, at least for me. And so
oftentimes we don't even realize that we do it until someone calls it out. And it's quite progressive of you to go to your mother first. And because, most schools of psychology believe in the idea that it all stems from the mother.
Absolutely.
How people treat someone is how it's reflected based on how their parents, especially their mother, was. And for you to go to the root, it's kind of like, I'm kind of hesitant to use this metaphor, but it's the first one that comes to my head right now is, to stop the snake is to cut off his head. And It's definitely one of those things, get rid of the hive to get rid of the bees.
I love that metaphor. It's true. And for me, my path has been one of a curious nature. I go and ask questions and understand things. I study it. I look for that occult knowledge. And experiencing what I am experiencing and did experience in the crumbling of a marriage that I'm not sure was ever together. I had to go to the source. Right. I had to go to that source. And it was like a natural pull. And I know when I first did this, I got on a train and left. People are like, why are you going to Chicago in the middle of the winter with no money? And I'm like, because I have to. I have to figure this out. I have to talk to that's where my mind went, where did this leave off? What happened here? And so, and it was funny because when I spoke to Linda, I said, tell me your secrets. And listen, right now I'm looking across me. This is what I say to her. I say, listen, I understand you're a fuck beast. I get all this. I say this to her and she's like, looks at me like, so I get it. Like, I get all of this. Don't hide anything. I need to hear all of the details. If you can help me out a lot, if you just tell me your secrets. And she did. And that was a great exchange where I respect that she just let him fly. And I was like, wow. And that's a cult for me. Most women get these, maybe get it. They get it with a secret wink or a nod. But she was telling me a woman's experience that is nefarious, is something that I didn't see too much in the Me Too movement represented, but I did see glimmers of stuff like that. Like I got married to a person and I didn't love him. I saw that I got to get out of the house, and I started to understand that marriage was like in my generation. Now I think younger people will see what a partnership can truly be, an open, friendly partnership can be versus I had to marry to get out of the house. That's a fucked up life on both ends. Like, the guy's thinking something other and, the woman's, that's fucked up. That's fucked up.
I've seen publications and opinions from people from as far as the silent generation, but mostly the baby boomer generation, that expressed how interracial marriage was the only one that was truly out of love, or how children from interracial marriages were out of love. And I wonder if this sort of connects with this idea of getting out of the house. You marry your neighbor, you marry your coworker or whatever. Whereas I think of my parents, and I know that my mother wanted to see the world be different, but I don't really know the origin of their marriage, but they are an interracial couple, whereas her parents were married by arrangement. And I've met other interracial couples who seem to be taboo couples of their time. And it's quite interesting with those juxtaposed with your mother's experience.
Wow, that's an interesting observation, and one I can't argue. Of course, if you're going against the grain and it's a taboo, you have so much to fight. I could see that as there's love involved in this. I can see that. That's a real interesting take on that, and that's wow, yeah.
You can even delve even further about at least something I'd heard as a mixed race child, as well as a mixed race adult, from Japanese people who didn't think I understood them, is how only her mother loves her. Only her mother understands her. And There were so many times where my mom was unaware of some of the abuses and misogyny I heard for being mixed race and female and Japanese descent. And she oftentimes had nothing to say about it, but her responses to me often were how she thinks I'm beautiful. And it's one of the few times that I've been told I was beautiful by my mother.
Boy. Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
So last episode, you mentioned about some of the expectations you had of your mother, or of your former co-conspirator, Carmi. And I'd like to kind of come back to that. What were some of the expectations that you realized later on were too high of your mother?
Well, that you could make her feel bad for being a sexual being. Like that was something my father would, she's fucking around. He had his. I'm not putting him down either, because I could see this on both sides.
Yes.
But his anger when they split up was based on things that, as a human being, you have a right to be. You have a right to be a sexual being and explore that, and you should. And I don't think a marriage should stop that. I don't believe that. But I don't think it should be in a nefarious, weird way either. I think that's awful for everyone involved. That's awful too. So that, I guess that's, like the submissive part of it, and because my mother she was a strong person, but she was also narcissistic. Like when I met her, when I talked to her, I said, she asked me how I felt about my upbringing. And I said, well, that's one of the first times you've ever asked me a question. You usually tell me what I think. And I thought that you were greedy. I thought you were greedy for yourself and you didn't pay attention. And she looked at me and said, I would agree. I was. And that's a moment I saw a mother where she was able to, be honest about it. Just honesty. Honesty is part of love, I think. And so that was nice. Those expectations are from mine. You ask about, it's from TV. Like, you have the expectations and and a lot of people like see the Brady Bunch, and that's from my generation. I don't know what you kids have, but you see this TV show where it's like the idealistic situation. They've got nice furniture. They speak to each other in a nice way, and you don't have that at home. So you get bummed out, and it's a fake. It's an illusion on TV. It's fake, but you fall for this illusion. And so those expectations are what I had, the illusion that TV or movies built. And so like with Carmi, her doing all of this work, like we would work for days on end, 15, like doing it. And I didn't see it anything. I barely saw it. I just barely saw it. I was just like, but I don't know if I expected my work to be seen either. It's not like I said, I'm working hard here while she's working hard. I'm not sure if that wasn't just me running at this goal and like, yeah, that's our deal. We're running at this goal. I don't give a fuck you're doing this work. I'm doing it too. I don't know if it was that or not, but I did expect, I think, when I raised my voice for a woman to listen, because I'm stronger, because I'm powerful. So when it got into the push that comes to shove, I'm like, no, smash my hand on the counter. And that was it. That's the end of this fucking conversation. So that was something that I definitely would enact often, my loud, my power, and invokes fear or scaring someone, a woman. And that, as I got older, I that toned down a lot. And that's when I read the Me Too movement stuff. I saw that, and that's probably something I did that I don't feel good about, but it was also something that's what that's what you're raised. You're raised into that. So without the internet, without these conversations, it's hard to move away from that.
It's what Dad did. It's what Grandpa did. It's
right.
It's a very primal for men to react with a loud bark. Right.
And it is, and it's the women like Carmi who barked back that I respected. Like I remember Heartwarrior Chosa. Now she's a Ojibwe clan up in Upper Minnesota. She's like, the chief gave her the pipe. She tells me, she shows me that, so she's a big deal up there. But I didn't, like she invited me to her house, and everyone's like, Heartwarrior invited you over to her house? She said, you're lying. I go, no, she wants to meet me, and when we were good friends. Like when the Thunderbirds came out, I always knocked on her door because I knew she had a feast going. Thunderbirds meaning lightning and thunder. And so Heartwarrior, we'd get into fucking fights. And like when I slammed my hand on the table, she slammed her hand on the table harder, stood up, and looked down at me as I was sitting. It
reminds me of a bear a little bit.
Oh, yes. She stood up like, you want a fist fight? And she's like fucking, like, I don't know, I'm 35 at 30, I don't know, yeah, something like 30-something. And she's like fucking 60 at that time. And she's standing above, like, with her fist clenched, like, she's just as animal as me. Like, wham! She smashed her hand on the table louder and harder. I was like, holy shit. Okay, Heartwarrior, you got my ear.
It sounds like also because her cultural background is vastly different from yours, she wasn't going to conform to your culture. She wasn't going to take the white man's thing. And even if you were female, she probably would have reacted that way too. Oh, and it seems like that was the first wave of you breaking a cycle. Whereas, what your expectations are, what television has told you is generations of a media indoctrination of how people should behave. Look at TV in the 50s. Look at the slideshows that kids were forced to watch. And I think that Me Too adds to breaking a cycle.
And we talked about the women in my life last time, and there's so many that I didn't mention. And Heartwarrior would be one of them, and Nikki would be one. I call her Mama Nikki now. And she this last year I would not have survived without her. And so Heartwarrior, you when you say that, it's incredible that you are correct. I believe that was one of the first. Heartwarrior is definitely a guide of mine and helps me out and gives me advice from time to time. She was definitely that person, you're right, that changed a lot of how I thought, because I'm in the middle of the Superior National Forest and I'm hanging out with Heartwarrior. And, I'm like, without that pretense or whatever, I don't get what a Native American is. I don't care. It just doesn't bother. I don't know what's going on. She explained to me her experience. And I was like, wow, this is heavy. But yeah, that was definitely something that broke the mold. And I remember at some point she said, you're one of the few white warriors I've ever met. like because of how I dealt with things and how I would submit to a fight with her when I was wrong, or I would tell her, I'm wrong about that. You were right last night. And she would just say, I know.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Heartwarrior was wonderful. That was, yeah, you're right. One of the greatest mentors and teachers I've ever had. I give like Dave Archer my credit. This guy, he's my art mentor. But no shit, like Heartwarrior was a bigger mentor and bigger influence. And I don't mean to compare, but that's the way it is. Heartwarrior, you're right. It definitely started to shape me in a way where I was like, because she was willing to tell me the good parts of me and also beat the shit out of the bad parts of me. She took me she saw me, the whole me. And so she challenged me and encouraged me at once, which was something I haven't had much. And in the white lower class or middle class experience, women did not do that. They just encourage you. Oh, it's okay. Boys will be boys. This, that, or another. And so and I'm not putting women down for that, but that's what my experience is that's part of the manipulation that my mother would give to my father. He was encouraging, even if he was drinking. Oh, you didn't drink that. There was always reasons or excuses for him that she didn't have. She couldn't as a mother. And that's one of the things I told her. The biggest expectation I felt bad about is I saw her as this, because the title mother is on her, she cannot make any mistakes. And I didn't see her as a human being. I saw her as a mother. And as a mother, you can't fuck up. And that's a bad way to see things, because mothers are human beings. They're going to make mistakes. They are sexual. They do have lust. They have greeds. They have wants and needs that they put to the side for a child, but they still want those things. They're embedded in them. So it's like not seeing her as a human being was wrong. But that's something I didn't know any better. But when I did, I let her know.
That definitely undoes a lot of societal gender roles we have for women, for mothers. And I think that to a point it transcends demographics, but I think that also the complicit boys will be boys, making excuses and just being sort of on the fence all the time is something that a lot of women are done with. And I think that one's going to be a very hard one to undo. It's toxic in so many ways. One of the ways it's toxic is how, in hindsight, we put people on a high pedestal of untouchable. And this isn't just mothers and grandmothers. This is also grandfathers, fathers, where especially if someone passes away, we're afraid to admit the flaws they had because of maybe a superstition, but mostly because we're told to hold them as a hero. And I think that's quite dangerous.
True. That's, believe me, I know the next episode we talk about my marriage crumble, and that was something I realized I put someone on a pedestal. And that was that's always probably a mistake, so that's, yeah.
Before we wandered too far away from her, I did want to get off my chest that I think that Heartwarrior Chosa treated you like an adopted son.
Yes, she did.
Almost like she took in some other cub into her cave sort of way. And it sounds like the challenges and the nurturing she gave you was something you missed out on as a child, and she gave that to you.
I will tell you, and from the last episode, that is right on. That is so funny because Nikki verbalized that at one point. Nikki,
nice.
Nikki verbalized that as well. She's like, I don't know why I don't have a nurturing bone in my body. I don't want children. I don't, I don't have any, fuck all of that. Now, she didn't use the word F. Okay. She's very, very well spoken, very well read. But she was like, I don't know why, but I feel like I have to nurture you. I have to, care for you. There we go. There's a
That
party going on
nurturing
above.
music.
Yeah, wonderful. and so oh, fuck, what was I saying? So, oh man, I'm so sorry, people of the universe. This is what happens. What was I talking about here?
Nikki
Oh,
had
Nick.
mentioned she's not nurturing.
Yeah, but she felt that way, and I felt the same way with the lady at the thrift store. I
Yes.
feel the same way with often like people because I'm just like a 5-year-old at times, and that's just the way it's been. Now, if you want to take a break, I can move into the other room.
I would love to take a break.
Oh yeah, well, Nikki would say something like when you were talking about nurturing, she had saw in me something she needed to nurture, which was odd for her because she didn't have a nurturing bone in her body. She felt she had no need to have children, never did. And she was just like, there was some draw to me where she felt she needed to bring me along. And when you bring up Heartwarrior in that situation, I can see it. See, that's the thing I saw in that. And we spoke about this an episode ago, I think, or two, where it's the woman in the thrift store. And she comes to me and she's nurturing. I could see the same look in her eyes that Nikki had, that Heartwarrior had, that certain people in my life that have been guides that are women, or like Dave Archer, and I noticed that gay males also are nurturing in that way too. They look at me in a sympathetic, and I don't want to say sympathetic, but maybe it is. Maybe it's sympathetic. I hate to put that word on me, but they look at me in a loving way, like they want to love me, or they want to give me something that I don't have, and they can see clearly, or they can feel clearly, I should say. They can feel clearly that this person, that naivete that I carry around with me is possibly because I'm still looking for that love. I'm looking for the love I didn't get when I was a child. Like you said, the mother shapes things. And I don't know if my mother, like, shit, it's got to be hard to be a mom when you're in a cage as a woman. And then you have children at a young age and you've never experienced life. You've never experienced your sexuality or anything, any of your dreams or wants. You want to travel the world, and here you are with a kid. So those are things that I've had sympathy with for my mom on. But at the same time, I also felt she was greedy in her, like, I don't know what to say about it. I'm not calling her wrong. I'm just saying I didn't get certain things that I need. And definitely Heartwarrior, Nikki, even Carmi, even yourself. Like, it's funny.
Aww.
Like you're a person that fought back too. Like like I said, like the women who fight back or say something, bang their head on the counter, hand on the counter as loud as I do. They're the ones that I'm like, okay, let's listen. Like I hear, and it's unfortunate, but it's not. I think more women should smash their hand on the counter when a man does. I also think men are intrinsically afraid naturally of women because women have a great power that they've had oppressed for years, where they're the people who protect the baby in the cave. Yes, they send the men out maybe to fight the lion, but they have an ability to fucking fight for the life of their child and themselves, the milk, the food for the child. That is something men don't understand.
And the lion that's going to go after the man is the lioness, not the one with the mane.
Right. And right, exactly. And so women have this power that I saw this before the Me Too movement. I would think, man, I would love to see some women in charge. Now, this is what I'm thinking, might is right and all this satanic stuff. I'm thinking, boy, more women should be in charge, because if we were going to go to war and a woman is like, yes, we're going to go to war, men would like throw themselves at the war by the millions. Like, it would be a devastating war. If a woman says war, that's our job. Like, I think as intrinsically, I don't mean in society anymore. Like but our job as males is to protect. I think maybe I'm wrong about that, because I know a lot of women will fight. I don't need your protection. I don't need your help, which is true. I get it. But I think we're talking caveman shit.
Yes. And some of it, not all of it, but some of it is a little bit of an overcompensation of generations of the opposite.
Okay. I could see that. So I think like if woman was in charge and she would try to negotiate this situation in an intellectual way, if it came to war, it would be the war to end wars. Like, and so that's how I've seen things. Maybe that's weird to see things that way, but I think women have this amazing power that have been oppressed for years. And I've always seen that because, again, my mother would display really fucking, like I said, she was harsh. And so I would see that, and I paid attention to my mother. And so I saw that in a woman, and I saw the shadow self of her. Like I said, I was brought along and all of her weird escapades. And so I got to see both sides of a woman. And I loved her and I paid attention to that. And so that carried through my life. I didn't have resentment for women because of that. I'm a fun person. So like, I mean, I in general like to make women laugh, make people laugh, and I like to have fun. And so I don't have animosity for that. Whereas my brother and my father they hate women with a vengeance.
Sorry, there was a little of a pause because I had to think about that for a minute. That was quite a surprising but relevant thing to say, and I do agree with that. I think a lot of people harbor anger that they don't know how to get over, and it goes along with seeking help and masculinity of just staying mad.
I like how you said people at first, because I've noticed with the Me Too movement, as great as it is, there is some toxic motherfuckers sprouting from it, women that are happy. Oh, and I want to put this in the show notes for this thing because I can't remember the name of the podcast.
Absolutely.
But it's Julia Atwood, I believe. She did the Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
But she has a story that my psychiatrist sent me. It's a podcast. And it was about a woman who ultimately kills a rapist after decades of climbing the ladder, fucking old men for money, all this shadow self of women. It was a really great, great, great story. And my point is that made me think of a lot of women, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, where they were definitely showing like, don't ask me to smile. And I love all those shirts. Sorry, not sorry. Don't ask me to smile. But women at counter clerks, like you go into a barista and the woman would almost growl at me. I'm like, hey, have a nice day. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, I sort of laugh. I'm like, okay, you're overcompensating. Like there's no reason to be mean. But there are women that are in a sadistic way enjoying men being hurt.
It's a bit of a power trip. And
yeah.
I know that there's always someone who calls something problematic. You can call me problematic. I'll absorb the problematic here. But the overcompensation is toxic. And it doesn't hurt just the person it affects. It hurts other women to do this. And it doesn't necessarily help.
It is quite hypocritical. And I see that with my father's rage or my brother's rage. I feel like it's very hypocritical that you want a woman in your life, yet you're angry at women. So it's like...
Yes, and it's sort of the same with the growling woman who tells you not to tell her to smile. And if you'd rather not smile, you'd rather not smile, but you shouldn't ruin other people's day with how you feel.
Right. And I appreciate anyone who's acting out. I really do. I like people who act out and are trying to push their politics forward. I versus people who are just taking it or sitting and watching TV. So I do appreciate all of that stuff, but I do find it like I don't think it's well thought out. Like if we're looking for peace amongst human beings, and like does that when you're angry at me as a man, are you angry at people of color? Are you angry at other people? Because that's what that is. Either we're all here and we're all roommates and we all got to get along and respect each other, or we don't. That's how I see it. I can't see it like I respect women, but I don't respect that. I don't like Greeks. I don't think they should be running restaurants. I don't say, I have to respect all of humankind. I don't have to respect all of humankind. I mean, they're my roommates, so I sort of got to get along. I don't have to respect your political views.
Yes. And this is something that I think the Pacific Northwest sometimes is a little guilty of, is this idea that if you don't agree with me, you oppose me. But the idea of tolerating each other is still having growing pains.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, I don't like, the respect is the wrong word. Right. I don't respect your politics, not yours. In general, I don't have to respect people's politics or even their stance, or I don't have to respect them, but I do feel common courtesies and hello, thank you very much. Thank you. I think those are appropriate.
Yes.
And, just because we're roommates, like you got to fucking deal with your roommate, even when you're in a bad mood. You just like, that's how I have to see the world. Like I can't, and I agree. I see that with the trees and the squirrels and everything around me. Like we're all one. And I think when you study, if you really study your philosophical bent, most philosophies go to that equation. Like we're all one. Even the satanic philosophy, I believe it should, as a young philosophy, I would say that we do have a energy that connects us, and it is a trip. And when we disrespect someone else, we're basically disrespecting ourselves, no matter your bias. Like, well, I don't like Greeks. It's, I get it. I've been in rooms, like Italians don't like Polish people don't like Italians. It's funny to joke, like those cultural jokes are funny, but it can be, but it's also like, you're sort of making fun of yourself too, because that joke applies to your culture too. It can, it's
a form of that I have a decade or so of experience with is orchestral. We're forced to sit next to each other and make noise, and you don't get to pick your seats. It's based on, sometimes it's political, sometimes it's nepotism, and sometimes, if you're lucky, it's based on your skill and merits, and so it's a ranking. And sometimes you don't get to sit by someone you would necessarily have a beer with. And you get into some insular overcompensation and anger within these situations. But we're stuck together. We have a common goal. And while we speak a different language, have different politics, we all have that language of music that is tying us together. And we have to put those things aside during the rehearsal. And I think of those situations when I think of when people do not respect each other's politics, but need to live together as societal roommates.
Yeah, and it's funny you say you have that music as your bond. And you see all these cliques, like they have sports as their bond. I have art as my bond with people. That's where I bond. I'm like, art. Okay, I can talk to you. We can communicate. The rest of the world sucks. And there's my bias as an artist. Like, I'm like, yeah, if you're not an artist, I don't know if I could talk to you. It's the same bias as other people have. And it's a true bias. Like, I don't know if I can deal with a person that likes sports so much. I can 5 minutes. I don't want to spend the whole day with you. I don't. It's going to be painful. And so but artists, even if we don't jive philosophically, we can hang. We could talk about colors, we could talk, like you're saying, your orchestra. You could talk about music. And so it's weird, like the language of love, or the idea of love isn't. That's our common bond, I think. That's why so many philosophers and, love is the law. That's why so many people come to that conclusion, I think, is that's our bond in humanity and just universally on this planet, with trees, with squirrels, with all of it, is that we love. I think the eagle loves the salmon, and they have a symbiotic relationship, even though the eagle eats the salmon. it has a respect and a love for what it's consuming. And I think we definitely are far apart from that in humanity. A lot of people, not the artists, because we're like probably better than most people. Ha ha, that's a joke.
You mentioned the Margaret Atwood story, and I think that people lash out oftentimes when they are in pain, like a thorn in a lion's paw. And perhaps your example of women who overcompensate, or men who are angry with their mother, they're hurting. And like we said before this, about how Me Too's results, we're going to be reaping what we sow generations from now. A lot of these scars that we have pulling the thorn out of our paws will heal. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But it's important to pull those thorns out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as artists, as the artist I am, that's, I try to do something like that. I'm a truth seeker and a truth speaker. And when I find a truth, a lot of times I've sought ugly truths and presented them. And I'd like the next 50 years of my life to be beautiful truths, but it doesn't always happen that way. You start to look for beautiful truths, and you find some scum at the bottom of the barrel, and that's what I present, I guess. And anyway.
So, besides the observations you had of women in your life, how did Me Too reflect on yourself and your personal experiences?
The hardest of all to talk about. Well, I started to see similarities in women who had been taken advantage of. And as my eyes were opening in my marriage to things I saw, I started to read about gaslighting and understand what that was. And the predatory nature of some men that women were describing often, like this was a stereotype of a predatory man and a person who was gaslighting, and was basically my situation. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in the woman's role here. I've fallen into the woman's role. I was the homemaker. I make the lunch, I make the dinner, and I don't see those as gender-specific roles, but most certainly how everything was playing out, like the disrespect I got for all I did for this person's career. I was starting to relate to these women. Like, I built the home, I did this, and the guy throws me on the street, I got nothing. And he was able to do that because he's a man. And I was like, wow, I do a lot of work around here. And then I stay up all night and do my artwork. And I do help her with her career. And wow, she is gaslighting me. That is, and this is stuff I learned with my psychiatrist and in therapy too. Like, my psychiatrist basically said when I told her my situation, she goes, wow, so you were in the woman's role. And I go, yeah, that's what I was thinking when I read the Me Too movement. You just confirmed it. And she goes, yeah, your wife was the man and you were the woman. This is an exceptional thing that you're able to talk about it and all that. But it was it's not easy to be in that role and, feel like, wow, I did everything right. And this person doesn't care. They never cared. I was just a tool to get where they're at now. And now that they're there, they can dispose me. And that's what I related to in the Me Too movement with women being thrown to the curb, used as a tool for someone else's success and never getting the credit, never reaping any benefits, or having to go to court and be brutal about, getting benefits and all this stuff. And so that was part of it. Like, living in a situation where you're gaslit all the time is a severe form of abuse. and it's not recognized in America, I don't think. I think it is over in Europe, in evolved cultures, but not in America. And I can tell you most certainly that that was not an easy thing to go through.
May I ask you for an example of what gaslighting is, just for our listeners?
Well, gaslighting is you notice something in the person saying that didn't happen. Like gaslighting, it's from a movie, I guess, where the person, the man, or my therapist says it's crazy making. It's a person purposely enjoying and getting on and making you crazy, making you think, making you doubt yourself. Where the movie originally was like, the guy would turn down the gas a little bit each time, and the wife would say, the lights are getting dim in here. And he goes, no, it's not. The lights are the same. And then he would turn it down the next day, and she goes, I could swear the lights are getting dim in here. And he'd be like, no, it's not. You're seeing things. And he would do it again. So in my relationship, that happened for years. For years. For a long time, I turned a blind eye to things that were happening around me. And that's because I had a low self-esteem and insecurity issues. And but then as it played out and the sadism was coming to the, oh God, it's hard to say. The sadism was coming to the front, and I could see the joy in my pain in my wife's eyes, her joy that I was in pain. I started to film things and document things. And I remember like I saw her take my keys and move them and put them somewhere I would never put them. And so I just played along, and I would be like, hey, where did my keys go? And she goes, I don't know. You know, I don't know where they went. And I saw her move them. I knew where she moved them. So when she went to work, I retrieved my keys. But, you know, I started playing along with it to see, because I couldn't believe this person would do this to me. And so that was part of it. Like, what, you know, and I don't know if I'm making sense at this point, because it's all starting to collide in my head. But, you know,
it's very interesting how passive-aggressive jabs and impersonal jabs hurt more than directly stabbing someone while they're watching.
Yeah, well, I would watch people at the counter clerks have this shocked look on their face. And I was like, why are they shocked? And then I started, what you learn as a bartender is you start looking for reflection in glass. You start looking for things that are going on behind your back.
Yes.
And so I started to look in the reflections, and I would see my wife making eyes, you know, like moving her eyebrows up and down, or blowing kisses or tonguing towards the counter person that was serving me, you know, giving me a coffee. And I would start seeing that. And so I saw that, and I was sympathetic to her needs. I tried to say, like, you know, are you looking to have an experience, or are you bisexual? You know, I don't want to get too, it's hard to do, but that I tried to talk about that stuff, and she would yell at me. And that was something that I was in, that my mother did. So I would just automatically, and I hate admitting this, I want to smash things up like a toxic dude, and punch holes in the wall. But it's like, I just started to submit, and just like, okay. And I shut up just like I would as a little kid. I just shut up. And I saw that happen more and more, and it got more and more aggressive. And I just went back to those boundaries I have, and I was like, you know, I can't have this in my life. This is not for me, and I don't know why this person's doing that. And I give them every chance to figure it out or talk to me about it, but it's not happening, and they're enjoying this. And I feel like I'm part of some, this is non-consensual. I'm part of some sexual energy or fetish, and it's non-consensual, and I'm not into this, you know. And that's how I felt. I don't know if I'm making any sense at this point, but
whether or not you have whether or not your kink is this or something else, I think that the code has been for a very long time that something is safe, sane, and consensual. Outside of that, if any of the three are out of it, it is abuse. And
oh, that's good to hear, because I didn't know
think that it's very, very not just brave of you, but very smart of you that you noticed something was wrong and you needed to get away.
I'd never heard the safe, sane, and consensual, but I thought all of the above were opposite. Like I was like, this is not consensual. How can this be happening? And people are approving of this and people are going along with it. And then the safe thing is like, in a lot of these situations, people get murdered. In my class of people, like the man will get murdered, or the woman, like the man will be so toxic, that's what women are afraid of. They're like, I read that in the Me Too movement. You're afraid of being yelled at. I'm afraid of getting murdered by a man. And it's true. Like that Brut can come out. And then you're like talking about sane. It was totally insane. So it met all three of the criteria you just met. It was like, I was like, this is fucking insane because it's so dangerous. And a friend of mine explained to me, and he's like into S&M, he like really studies the S&M stuff. And he was like, sometimes when you have been raped and abused, there's a pheromone, there's a scent that comes off of you when you're in that situation, and it's a different chemical, and people get addicted to that. That's why they come into the S&M world. They need to have that when they do rape fantasies and other things. They need to have that scent come out of their body for them to bring them back to something. I don't understand all of it, but he was talking about the chemical reaction, and I was like, wow, that is so wild. And
it's almost like chasing a supernatural high.
Yeah.
But the thing about rape fantasy versus true abuse is that it's sort of like therapy where it's in a safe environment. It's a controlled environment that both peers have an eye-to-eye agreement that this is what it is. It's not to actually reap an abuse from the other person and drain them. It's not psychic vampirism or any sort of physical or emotional abuse.
Right. And that, when I started to, like, it's been a year I've been processing and writing about this, and I wrote something similar to what you just said. I thought a lot of how I see S&M is a therapeutic thing, especially for younger people. It's great. When you get older and you're still a sadist, like a sadist at heart, you have things that you haven't dealt with. And the S&M did not work as therapy, and you should have gone to a therapist and put that stuff on the table, because sadism is a different thing altogether. And when you decide to cling to sadism, you're probably deeply troubled. And
yes.
I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to agree with anyone else. I don't think the Marquis de Sade was a hero. I think he was someone who was severely troubled. I read all of his works. I appreciate his honesty. But I think at some point it went from therapy to
addiction.
I'm addicted. Like that, what you said, that, what did you call it? A mystical addiction or a...
Yes. Yeah. A supernatural addiction.
Love that. It became a supernatural addiction. I love that phrase for this. Exactly.
I think that this applies to actually a lot of people within the kink community, not just as a participant, but even as an observer. There has been history in some communities of people who just took it way over what it was, and they end up being blacklisted from the communities because they nearly kill someone, or they take things way too personal and start taking their own therapy into their own hands. And at that point, you've done it too long, or you need to get out of it. It's just the same as self-medication or using essential oils or, crystals, things like that, where it may work for you now, but it's not the only occult knowledge you need. And this just traces back to our episode about self-help. And It's quite important to seek help or find ulterior motives when all is going wrong, rather than digging a hole that is deeper for yourself.
I'm not sure what happened in my life ever, like as a child or anything. I've always been the person that people have felt okay with picking on. and that's fine. But as an adult, I think what happened to me could be laughed at or seen as justified because I'm a brute male or I yell or things like that. And, when I look back on that stuff and within the Portland community and people that participated in this, I'm always like, how could they do that? They're so politically correct there. And I get like, oh, it's because, and it goes back to the Me Too movement. Maybe it's like, oh, and it goes to this Atwood story that I'm going to include, because it was like the narrators in this story, the narrators at the end, they talk about it, and they talk about their two women, and they talk about how it was wrong what she did, but how most women that hear this story would feel a sense of justice and feel guilty about that. Like, sort of like, it was like, it felt good. This story felt good. And boy, it was wrong. And so I feel like for me is like, it's because I'm a man. It's okay to act this way, like in Portland, in that culture, because this is not the United States. We're all different regions. In that area, it's gone so far politically correct, it's become toxic in certain areas. And I think this was one of them. And it's also, oh, Shane's a Satanist, so he should be able to read people's minds. Shane's a great Satanist and a big deal Satanist, so I should be able to know everything around me and the environment around me and be able to tell me I should know what Nannerl's thinking right now and be able to move around her and manipulate this thing and win at all costs. And that's not a reality with the science of being a human being, like medical science, psychological science. That's what I consider satanic, is science and, evolution of humankind. And there's the smudging, the sage, the crystals didn't help me. The mind reading failed me. The thing that helped me was the science of the situation, the Me Too movement, and reading these stories and going, oh my God. And at that point, the brute male came out in me, and I was like I told my therapist, like, all my shit's been stolen. Like my hard drives, my 20 years of writing, everything's sitting there. I can't get anything back. And I told him, if it were toxic Shane, when I found out all this stuff, shit would have been resolved real quick. Like, I would have all my shit. People would have ran from the hills. They would be afraid of things, because like, I survived motherfucking Chicago, and I've been shot at, and I know how to get my shit. I know, and it was hard to walk away and not be toxic, because I'm really good at that, and I'm really good at so that was a hard thing to do.
I find the double standard that you experience to be incredibly relatable.
Well,
unfortunately, we don't deem everyone as precious as each other. And I've been a victim of that too, and I understand your frustration, and I'm very sorry you had to deal with it. The reaction of anger and calling it out sometimes feels futile, because it's that weird groupthink mentality where those establishing those rules of who is or isn't precious laugh at it. They just see you more and more of a coward, or being a wimp, or being a jerk. And it's a groupthink form of gaslighting. And unfortunately, the toxicity is a deep cut that extends to further indoctrinating a gender role, or perhaps demographic roles of who fits in social hierarchies, which is just plain awful, considering these are the same people who will yell if social Darwinism existed in, say, a book from 200 years ago or anything like that, and the same people are here doing the exact same thing. And that idea of they had it coming because they are is a completely different and absurd idea compared to they had it coming because they did this. And even that does not necessarily create true justice. It's a very false form of justice.
I love everything you just said. And, I wanted to believe you me, had I acted in a toxic way, they would have regretted things. I don't know if that, certainly when I came back to Chicago, people even said that, like, man, I can't imagine if you would have lit the place on fire. And it was the hardest thing to walk away from everything. And it was much like Ely, Minnesota. It was so hard to leave there peacefully. And I don't know why that is, but that just is. And those are things that take a lot of energy from me.
I completely understand. The dog barking in the background understands as well.
You can hear that.
Yes.
That little bastard.
It feels like he's really on your side. And so shout out to the dog who's on Shane's side here. We're part of your pack.
Today's been a very high energy day. Everyone's noisy. It's been, wonderful, I guess, and not for recording.
We've had some interesting occurrences. My recorder had a faulty thing happen having to do with the firmware, and it was really scary when it happened because it was such an odd problem. And then, you had your neighbors and their energy, and then you have this dog barking, and it's like I told you personally last night, that a lot of this discussion is very much like when movies like The Omen or Poltergeist were made, where it seemed like some outside force didn't want it to happen. So we're going to push forward, and next time you hear us, I'm just going to call it the main event. We're going to be up to the main event. Truckosaurus is done, and we are going to further this conversation, and we're going to discuss Shane's marriage and how it ended. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune in to our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit shanebugby.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugby. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and ShaneIsTheDevil.com.